had something very, very specific in mind. He had a video game that he had been wanting forever. So video game's a little bit lower level of abstraction. It's a little bit more specific. I now know that it's not an action figure, it's not a Hot Wheels car, it's not a football. He wants a video game. Still, we've only gone down to probably at Kmart would be hundreds of options. At that time, he had a Nintendo. Okay, am I all right now? Still pretty vague, right? It's still pretty high abstract because at that time Nintendo had, I know they had the Game Boy, they probably had Super Nintendo and GameCube, at least those three. And Jared had a GameCube, so he wanted a Nintendo GameCube game. What is going to be the most specific, the lowest level of abstraction term we could put there? The name of the game. My mom and dad, who lived in Arizona at the time and didn't know bupkis about video games, knew nothing about video games. If Jared called Granny and Grandpa on his birthday or close to his birthday and said, I want a video game for Christmas or for my birthday, they wouldn't have any clue. They wouldn't know what he was talking about. He would have to use a very low level of abstraction term for Granny and Grandpa to get him the right game. He would have to say, and back then it was Super Mario Kart that he wanted. Now, because that was the only system that game came out on at that time, Granny and Grandpa in Phoenix could go into a Toys R Us and say, our grandson wants a Super Mario Kart? And that guy at Toys R Us would say, yeah, they're right over here, we'll get you one. And he would get the right game. If Jared just told Granny and Grandpa he wants a GameCube game, they don't know. They're going to get him Barbie's Beach Adventure or something crazy. They don't know what game he wants. They're not going to be able to get the right thing. But if he uses a low level of abstraction, word, language, description, then it's specific. There's no guesswork at all. You're not asking the listener to fill in the blanks. So here's the important thing to get in your notes. Are you ready? The effective communicator, this is under levels of abstraction. The effective communicator will use a low enough level of abstraction The effective communicator will use a low enough level of abstraction that the message is comfortable and natural, but still understood by the listener. The effective communicator will use a low enough level of abstraction that the message is comfortable and natural, but still understood by the listener. I'll do it one more time, and then we're videoing, so it'll be in the Blackboard show tonight. The effective communicator will use a low enough level of abstraction that the message is comfortable and natural, but it is still understood by the listener. Still understood by the listener. The principle is that language meanings vary in levels of abstraction. As an effective communicator, we most often communicate somewhere in here. We don't go around using the lowest level of abstraction all the time. We would sound like a robot or a computer, it wouldn't be natural. It wouldn't sound comfortable for us. The key is that you have to gauge the relationship. You have to determine what is a low enough level of abstraction that they can understand. I could ask my wife, for example, who's as big a Buffalo Bills fan as I am, I could tell her that I want a Buffalo Bills jersey for Father's Day. Make sure the boys get me a Buffalo Bills jersey for Father's Day. She would know exactly which jersey to get me. She would know which one I want. I could say that to Chelsea, who knows I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, I think, but she wouldn't, because of our relationship, we don't watch the football games together. She doesn't know which guy I really like. She wouldn't know exactly which one to give me. So when I'm communicating with Chelsea and telling, hey Chelsea, this is what I'd like for my birthday, I would have to use a very low level of abstraction message for her to understand. When Jared's communicating with Granny and Grandpa, he's got to go all the way down here. With me, as soon as he said video game, I knew exactly what he was talking about. And to show you that the more things change, the more they stay the same. John Claude, who is Jared's older brother, came home from college, excuse me, a couple of weeks ago for the summer. He's been after me to get video games since he got back. He wanted for Katie's Wii U, he wanted Super Mario Kart for Katie's Wii U. And that's been probably 20 years since we got the first one. So some things never change. It depends on our audience. We have to determine the relationship and how low a level of abstraction we need to use to be able to be understood. How specific do we have to be? Now, the effective communicator is willing to, if I'm talking to you guys and I get feedback from you that's like, huh? What? Then I've got to be willing to drop down and be more specific until you understand what I'm talking about. We really experienced this when we moved here and people would give us directions on how to get someplace. We didn't know anything. So they'd say, you know where Bill Johnson used to live? Go on out to his place. And what? We don't know. So they would see that we didn't know what they were talking about. Go to where Walmart used to be, and it's right next to. Used to be didn't work for us. So they would have to be more specific with us in giving us directions. They would be willing to drop down. Now you probably had teachers before, instructors before, that are lecturing to the class, talking about a subject, talking about a topic, and you'll raise your hand and you'll say, wait a minute, you lost me, I don't know what that means. I didn't get that. And some teachers will go back and repeat the exact same thing over again. Have you ever had that happen? That doesn't help. I heard what you said, I didn't understand it the first time. An effective instructor, good instructor, is going to go back and repeat it and be more specific. Use a lower level of abstraction so that you understand what they're saying. The effective communicator is willing to go back and be more specific until the audience understands. Now, why am I harping on this? Why did I spend so much time? You're going to have at least 2 of these pyramids on the chapter test. And very often I put them in the model section of the final. On this chapter test, you will have at least 2 of these pyramids. And what I will say, they're worth 10 points each. So at least 20 points on the test are going to be dedicated to high abstract language. So what I typically do is I'll have a pyramid on there, and I'll have the high abstract word at the top. I'll put something at the top. And guys will back me up on this. This is the kiss of death. My wife does this all the time. Paul, I'll be leaving the house and she'll say, stop and get us something to eat for lunch. I'll put something like this on the test. High abstract. What is she thinking? If you know, you're a better man than I am, because I have no idea. But guaranteed, guys will back me up on this, I'm going to get the wrong thing. I'm not going to get the right thing. She used high abstract language, but she's got something low abstract in mind. So on the test, I will give you the high abstract language, the high abstract term. Each level is going to get a little bit more specific. She wants a sandwich. She wants a sandwich from Wendy's. She wants a chicken sandwich from Wendy's. She wants the chicken bacon club from Wendy's. So I get exactly what I'm supposed to get. When you get down here to the bottom, there's no guesswork at all. It's very, very specific. Anyone knows what you're talking about. So if I put a person up here, what's going to be the lowest level of abstraction? Their name. Okay, so if I use a football player and you don't know anything at all about football, make something up. I don't care how accurate. I just want to see that you understand the concept. We go from very vague to very specific. Our language varies in levels of abstraction. And what that means to us as effective communicators is that most of the time we communicate in here where it's comfortable and natural. But if they're not getting it, if the person you're talking to is not understanding, we're aware, we're paying attention, and we're willing to drop down and be more specific. Does that make sense? Could you do 2 of those pyramids? Okay, big points on the test. Okay, we're almost done with this first list. Number 5. Can I come over here again? Language and meanings can be both denotative. Remember, you asked me about this on the study guide? Denotative and connotative, and I couldn't understand why they put it on that last study guide when we didn't talk about it until this chapter. Denotative and connotative are important vocabulary terms. You need to know those terms. Language and meaning can be both denotative and connotative. The denotative meaning of the word, means its literal definition. If you look up a word in the dictionary, you will find its denotative meaning. Denotative means the literal definition of the word. Definitely will be on the test. Denotative means literal definition of the word. Connotative, I call it the emotional meaning of the word. The feeling meaning of the word. How do people react to that word? How do they respond to that word? That's connotative meaning. Connotative is the emotional meaning. How do people react or respond to that word?
Can you repeat denotative?
Denotative is the literal definition of the word. It's the literal definition. When you look it up in the dictionary, you find the denotative meaning. That's denotative. Literal definition. Connotative is the emotional meaning of the word. How do people react or respond emotionally to the use of that word? And you probably have heard people say that has different connotations to it, or that has negative connotations to it. It doesn't sound good. People react negatively to it. It sounds bad. If I say that was stupid, very negative connotations to that word. It doesn't sound good. Need to know this for the test. If a word has a positive connotation to it, if the word has a positive connotation to it, we call that word a per word. If the word has a positive connotation to it, we call that per word. In other words, people react positively to it. They respond favorably to that word. Sounds good, feel good word. has positive connotation. She did great. That was great work. That's positive connotation. Negative, words with a negative connotation to them are called snarl words. Positive is purr, negative is snarl. Now, as an effective communicator, and I get a lot of this when I do commercials at the radio station, a lot of times I'll get copy. That's the words that I use for the commercials, the script for the commercial. I'll get copy that has snarl words in it. The owner of the business wrote it, but it has snarl words in it. My job as an effective communicator is to be able to take those snarl words and change them into purr words without changing the denotative meaning of the word. Does that make sense? So instead of using a word that has a negative connotation to it, people react negatively to, I'll use a word that has more positive meaning to it. Does that make sense? If you listen carefully to commercials, car commercials are a good example. Very, very rarely does a car commercial tell you how much a car costs. You very rarely hear a commercial that tells you how much a car costs. And if you do, it's usually a local commercial that the dealer has put together. Cost is considered a snarl word. People don't like to hear the word cost. Instead of telling you how much a car costs, what do the auto dealers tell you in their commercials?
You can get it as low as so.
As low as, that's per
Or rebate.
rebate, save, right? If you listen to most car commercials, they'll say save $8,000 on a new Cadillac. Save is a great per word. They're not changing the cost of the car at all. They're just saying it in a more positive way. So instead of saying that someone is a terrible teacher, you would say that they're difficult or they assign a lot of work. Sounds a lot better than saying they're terrible. The effective communicator is able to take negative, and part of the trick is identifying what's a snarl word. Sometimes we're surprised that people have hot buttons. Have you ever known someone that they don't like certain words, it just sets them off and they get mad? They have those hot button words. Part of being an effective communicator is identifying what a snarl word is. I had a student in that speech class in Russell County that was talking about the person she admired the most was her uncle. She really loved her uncle. In fact, just last week, she was buying a used car, looking for a new car, a used car. And she took her uncle with her because he could Jew anyone down. And when I pointed out to her that that wasn't appropriate language, that that's offensive language, she had no idea. She was mortified, embarrassed, turned red, had no idea that that could be offensive to someone, to use that language. So part of being an effective communicator is being able to identify what is snarl, what has negative connotations to it. Good communicators, preachers, writers, comedians, they are very in tune with this, and they'll work forever to get just the right word, to get the response from the audience that they want, because they're really in tune with connotative meaning, connotative language. Okay, so language meaning can be both denotative and connotative. Denotative is the literal definition of the word. Connotative is the emotional meaning of the word. Number 6, and then we'll take a break. This is the last one in the list. Don't forget it. Last one in the list. I think it's one of the most important, if not the most important. It's certainly one of the most frustrating aspects of interpersonal communication, no matter how good a communicator you are. no matter how effective a communicator you are, meanings are only partially communicated. Meanings are only partially communicated. No matter how effective you are at communication, no matter how good a communicator you are, how good a people person you are, people can't read your mind. They can't experience what you've experienced. They're not going to get the full meaning of what you're saying. Your role as an effective communicator, and this is what you need to get in your notes, is to communicate enough of the meaning. Your role as an effective communicator is to communicate enough of the meaning, that the listener understands the message. Your role as an effective communicator, what you're trying to do as an effective communicator, is communicate enough of the meaning. Your role as an effective communicator, is to communicate enough of the meaning that the listener understands the message. You communicate enough of the meaning so that the listener understands the message. And if their feedback is showing you that they don't get it, you haven't communicated enough of the meaning, they don't understand the message, then you're willing to go down and be more specific. You're willing to use more direct language. You're willing to repeat it back so that they do understand enough of the meaning to understand the message. Have you ever been telling someone about something funny that happened, and you're laughing and you're telling them this story and you got tears coming back and say, it's so funny, and they're just looking at you like you're stupid, and you're trying to tell them the story and how great it was, and they're just looking at you, and you finally say, what? I guess you had to be there. It was hilarious. But they weren't there. They didn't experience what you experienced. They didn't see what you saw. They can't get inside your mind. You can't communicate the entire meaning, but you have to be willing to communicate enough of the meaning so that they understand the message. Meanings are only partially communicated. And it's our role to communicate enough of the meaning that the listener understands the message. And whatever that entails, that's what this course is about. How do we do that? Well, we become more specific, we become more direct, we slow down, we speak up, we adjust our body language, whatever it takes to communicate that meaning. Okay, those are the 6 principles of meaning. The 6 principles of language meaning. They will definitely be on the test. Probably on the listing, but you know, there's going to be questions from this list on the fill in the blank, the true, false, the matching. You'll have to match up connotative meaning and denotative meaning with their definition. So it's important you have this in your notes and understand it. We'll have the video in the Blackboard shell by tonight. Let's take a 5-minute break. All right.